הכל טוב, הכל טוב, הכל טוב. גלעד, הכי טוב זה להיות אינדור. מה שנותן לי בווייט בלנס זה לא יכול מדי.
לכולם, ברוכים השבים. שמי אריק בן מאיר קוזקוב, ואני מרכז את תחום ה-APV פה במיגל.
אני מאוד שמח ונרגש לפתוח את החלק השני של היום. אני רוצה להודות לכל מי שנמצא פה, מי שנמצא איתנו בשידור, שצופה בנו מהבית. תודה רבה לכם, זה לא מובן מאליו. המושב הראשון בחלק הזה הוא מושב תעשייה וטכנולוגיה. מיד אחריו יתחיל מושב תחרות הסטארט-אפ, מושב הסטארט-אפים, שנראה על ידי ניסן זאבי ממרגלית סטארט-אפ סיטי. אני חושב שבהחלט יש למה לחכות. אני שמח מאוד להציג את המרצה הראשון של המושב הזה, דוקטור דמיאן פומה, מחברת סאונד הצרפתית, שהגיע אלינו הישר ממונפליה, ליאור שבצרפת. דוקטור דמיאן פומה הוא אחראי על תכנון המחקר והפיתוח של סאונד.
Good afternoon, everybody. You heard me well? Okay. So, my name is David May. I'm R&D Program Director in Sunnyside. And today I'm very, very proud to be here. And thank you very much for the invitation. And it's a great honor to present you our results. My presentation is follow this one of my colleagues this morning about how we did and how we use the technology of agrivoltaics, dynamic agrivoltaics. And I will show you the results about grapevine, on the effect of dynamic agrivoltaics in grapevine in terms of development and in terms of quality and yield. This is a big research program, and I will present a lot of things. The context is now the climate change has a big consequence in grapevine and in vine production, because you know that the elevation of temperature shorten the growth season about the grape. And the thing is, when you have, in the beginning of the season, very soft winter. You have bud break, will be more earlier in the season, and you have a risk of big frost event. The other thing is, when you short the season, in the end of the season, you can have harvest will be more earlier too. And here in this graph, you can see in France, in the Rhône Valley, the date of harvest for grapevine will be earlier more and more during the years. Here, 1940 to 2010, and you can see 3 weeks earlier in the season. And why it's a problem for grapevine growers? Because, in fact, it's changed the quality of berries. You have wine with more sugar, with less acidity, and with small berries, and the weight of berries is smaller, because in fact, with big irrigation, with big temperature, you have sugar accumulation inside the berry, and the thing is, in maturity, the maturity is not good for do a great wine. So for that, there is a solution. We can use agrivoltaics for solution for do that. The other thing with climate change is extreme event. So frost event, or like here, heat wave event. Here, it's the first time we have this kind of event in France in 2019 in the south of France. And you can see that in just one day, all the vegetation of the canopy of the grapevine was burned, and there is a big loss of yield here. So, the solution, maybe it's dynamic agrivoltaics. And for that, just a quick definition to complete the one this morning. What is dynamic agrivoltaics is just panels over the top of the crop in a structure at 4.5 meter above the crop, and with panels which recover near 40% of the surface of the soil. So with that, and there is two kind of because these panels are put in trackers, and these trackers are in south-north orientation. And with this structure, we can just track the sun, as you see here in the video, or don't track the sun, untrack. And we are able to manage the shading percentage above on the crops. So with that, we can diminish the temperature, we can protect the crop of climate change consequences. So Sunnyside, as Gerardo said this morning, did a big research program since 2009 with first works with INRAE and Christian Dupraz. And now we are in the third part of Sunnyside, 3. And in this part of the research program, we test this kind of dynamic structure on several crops. And there is now 4 PhD students who try and test several crops. And grapevine is the crops tested by Benjamin Tifon-Terrade in a PhD with INRAE in Montpellier. And this kind of program and the technology of Sunnyside earned several innovation awards as CTV Innovation Awards, a big international grapevine salon. So in this program, we have different experimental sites on grapevine. So some fixed, because we want first to see what are the consequences of shading and what level of shading is important for grapevine. And so 2 kind of sites. Here it's every near Montpellier in south of France, so in Pêche Rouge or in directly in Montpellier. And we have 2 dynamics sites with dynamics agrivoltaics. Here in Piolinc, it's just in north of Montpellier, with 2 different structures. And in this way, we can able to test different shading strategies. And we have a real site, a real size site, the first one in the world on perennial crops in the very south of France, in Tresserre, with 4 hectares of structures in grapevine. So here are some photos of different sites. In Piolinc, you can see the 2 structures in above 4.5 meters above the grapes. It's Grenache Noir, and the vineyard have 10 years, more than 10 years old. You can see 2 other photos. This one is very known in the web. So, and you can see that the structure, we can put in the structure some other kind of protection. Here, hail nets to protect with other kind of events. This is Tresserre, so the 4 hectares above vineyard. You see that the cover of the panels are only 40% of the soil. Now, about material methods and what we did in terms of experiment, just to compare fixed fixed structure with dynamics, you can see that we tried 2 different shading impacts, near 30% to 50% of shading, and dynamics, how we can move the tracker during the days as we want, and we can put several and test several strategies of shading. We can just let pass through the sun in the morning, for example, and shade just the afternoon. And in this way, we are able to manage the shade, the percentage of shade between 10% of shade to 70% of shade. And the strategy we choose for this one is 40% to 56%. So a little bit more than fixed here. In terms of what we measured in this vineyard, we have several things. Microclimatic variables with temperature, with leaf temperature, humidity, like that, PAR, photosynthetic active radiation, water status with a pressure bomb. So we measure different variables of water status, for example, with soil probes for humidity, for example, photosynthesis, yield, and quality of berry. In terms of result, what we saw is we decrease the air temperature during the day when the shade path 2 to 4 degrees in terms of air temperature. But just if you put a probe on the leaf and you measure the leaf temperature, you can see that 4 degrees of temperature correspond sometimes to 10 degrees in the leaf exposed to the sun. So it's very interesting. And just to put shade on the vine, what we saw is that we are able to avoid leaf burns and fruit burns. And in terms of growth, we remark that 10 to 15 days more growth under the panels, under the shading, than the control. And here you have just a comparison by a photo about leaf burn, you can see here. And just here we are under the panel, and the grapevine is very in growth. Always in temperature, you can see that climate change is about an elevation of temperature, but there is more frost event, and frost events in the season which can have big consequences, because soft winter, but break earlier. So with that, we can have a big event because the vegetation is here, and vegetation is not very protected by the frost. So in that, we observed during the winter 2 to 4 degrees in terms of differences between the controls and under the panel. And in that way, we observe that directly in the soil with a radiometer. It's like a big thermometer for surface. And we avoid 5 to 7 frost episodes during the winter in this 2020 in Tracer. And in the photo here, what you see is under the panel, the interrow, the grass in interrow are green, but in the control is in the end here, and all the control are frost. In terms of water status, so there is a better water status under the panel, but that's what we expected. Here, in terms of leaf water potential, you can see that in blue, it's blue and orange. It's the two type of structure of dynamic agrivoltaics in Piolenc. And yellow is the control. So more you are stressed, more you are in negative. So you have leaf water potential better and comfortable for the grapevine under the panel, and in 2020 is the same, but 2020 in France is a rainy year, so we observe less thing. And in terms of irrigation, you have the amount of irrigation we need to put for the grapevine during the season. So here in green and blue, it's about dynamic agrivoltaics, and yellow in control. And you see that we are able to save near 30% of water needs during the season for irrigation. So it's very an interesting result. And in terms of yield, what we saw in the same site in Piolang, that we have not a lot of difference between the year between under the panels or control. The only difference we saw is here for one treatment, and but this year we don't take into account because there is a big frost and not just a radiative frost, because the result was I showed you before that the structure protects against frost. The structure are able to protect against radiative frost, because when you have a radiative frost, we can able to put panel horizontally, and you have effet de serre, sorry. You earn temperature, you keep temperature under the structure. And, but here we have an advective frost. It's a big air from the north during a lot of days with very, very low temperature, -5, -10 during 1 or 2 weeks. And so even if we are under the structure, it don't protect a lot. It protects for 2 or 5 degrees, but not a lot. And in this way, we observed under the control or under the panel, lot variability in the plants. So we don't take into account this result. And maybe it's explain what we have this kind of difference. But the experiment continues this year. So we have 1 year more about that. And so in terms of quality, and it's in the end of my presentation, what we saw, and here it's just the result for the fixed panel and just high level shade. So that's to bring shade to grapevine, allow you to slow the sugar accumulation in berry. And you can see that, so the blue is under the big shadow level, so 50%. The green, the less shadow level, it's around 30%. And the red is the control. So you see that in the accumulation of sugar inside the berry, you slow down the accumulation. And for both years, and in the end, you can have quite the same level of sugar, but you earn time. And in the meanwhile, you have here the total acidity of the grape. And what you see is that to bring shadow, a protection by shadow, allow you to have more acidity in the grape. So for the quality of berry and the quality to do a best wine is very important, because you need the equilibrium between sugar and between acidity in the berry. And the other thing I don't show you here is that we observed more phenolic compound. This compound inside the berry is very important for organoleptic taste, the taste of the wine. And you have more anthocyanin concentration in the berry under the panels. So, in fact, you are able, with this kind of technology, to protect your grapevine, your vineyard, and to have time to choose when you want to harvest or not. And the technological maturity you want to have to have the best berry, and after that, to have the best wine. So thank you very much. And if you have questions, you can ask me.
Damian, please. You've mentioned 4.5 meters from the soil to the panel.
Yeah.
Now, how would it work with a mechanical harvester? You see here, the reality is for the large-scale vineyards, they are harvested by a combined harvester that rides on the vine. So how would it work, 4.5?
For most of harvester machina, it's okay to harvest with this kind of machina, because we are able to choose the height. So generally it's between 4 to 5, but sometimes it's 5.5 or maybe 6. It depends of the materials of the growers, and we define with them what kind of structure we need. But all the site, this site here, it's harvested by machina. So.
Can you comment about the light harvest, the photovoltaic effect of how much? This is something that you probably did not mention here, but how much of the electricity did you produce?
Ah, okay, yeah. Sorry. This one is 2.5, 2.7 megawatts. So in term, it's what did Christian Dupraz this morning. So for 1 hectare now, because in terms of panels, this one is just single panels, because the construction is in 2017, and there is no yet double side. Yeah, sorry. And now we can consider 1 hectare, 1 megawatt. So it's a very, very interesting thing.
And do you see the advantage of the moving panel compared with your?
Yeah, the fixed. So, in fact, there is a lot of results. I can't show a lot of things here because the PhD students published. So you need to stay for the publication. But what I can say that is there is a lot of good things with dynamics, because the fact to bring a lot of shade under the canopy, you create shade leaves, and in create shade leaves, in fact, it's not very good, because you have less photosynthesis, and you have less carbohydrates produced by the grapes. So you have very loss in yield. In other sense, when you just to find the best way and the best strategy to shade, for example, to let a lot of light during the day, you don't create these shading leaves. And in this way, you don't modify the habits of the grapes. The other thing is, with this kind of technology, you can put vertically the panels in the morning or in the end of afternoon, and you can have more electricity produced in this period, and the grapes is not during this period that she needs light. So in fact, it's good for the grid, and because people use more electricity in the morning or in the end of afternoon, and so you have a lot of things. A good yeah, bench. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, דמיין. המרצה הבא שלנו הוא ליאונרד קפולנר מפרנהופר אינסטיטוט פור סולאר אנרגי סיסטם, ISE. הזדמנות להגיד להם תודה רבה, הם שותפים שלנו לכנס. והוא יציג את המחקר שלו כחלק מעבודת מאסטר עם הכותרת אופטימיזציה של תפוקת יבול במערכות אגרו-וולטאיות עם טרקרים. בבקשה.
Hello everyone, my name is Leonhard Pfüllner and I'm honored to be one of the speakers today at the Sunnyside Apvsummit. To shortly introduce myself, I work for Fraunhofer ISA since October 2020, mainly in the field of flight simulations. My background is mechanical engineering in my bachelor's and sustainable systems engineering in my master's. Today, I want to present you my master thesis, which I conducted last summer. And the title is, as you can see, Yield Optimization in Tracked Agrivoltaic Systems. So let's start right away with our today's agenda. First of all, I want to show you why I chose the topic and which questions I investigated. Then I show you the tools I used and how the modeling works in the background. For example, what radiance is and how it is connected with bifacial radiance. Then I introduce my virtual plant called PCSE to you, the Python crop simulation environment. After that, I show my different scenarios and how I assess the performance with the land use efficiency measure LER. Finally, I explain the results of one scenario, followed by a discussion and conclusion. As all of us are kind of familiar with the concept of agrivoltaics, we know two things. We want to produce power and we want to grow plants. And if we now want to build an agrivoltaic system, at some point, we need to make a decision. How do we allocate the solar resource towards these two objectives? After the allocation, we then will realize that this, if done properly, can lead to even improved yields in agricultural products for some plants compared to reference conditions. But this picture might change in the next year with different weather conditions. This leads to the necessity of the closer investigation of the connection between plant growth and shedding. So for this, we need this one thing. We need a simulation environment being able to predict crop yields in partial shaded conditions. It is not existent to date, so it needed to be created. I wanted to combine PCSE and bifacial radiance for this purpose. Then I wanted to understand how crop growth is connected with shading, and when I understood it, can I control it? And if yes, which boundaries? In general, there are several possibilities to control the orientation of solar panels. Here you can see some of them. The vertical single-axis tracking moves left and right, whereas horizontal single-axis tracking moves up and down. Two-axis tracking is a combination of both. In this work, I used the horizontal single-axis tracking approach to change the orientation of solar panels. After I knew I can control the panels, I was interested in how they need to be tracked to maximize crop growth. But I was also aware that this constrains the solar power production, so I also wanted to find a compromise between these two goals. Finally, I was interested in how these different approaches perform in terms of agricultural production, PV power output, and land use efficiency. So now we come to the light simulation tool, and this light simulation tool is called Radiance. It is a light simulation software to answer the question, how much light is where at which point in time? It's a so-called backwards ray tracer. It traces rays back to the light source, considering all seen objects in between. It's already quite old, now already 36 years, and was developed by Greg Warren. But it's also quite accurate, and a lot of papers exist validating the results. It's also highly customizable in terms of usable materials, scenes, or light sources. Even artificial lighting is possible. More flexibility comes along as it is a command line program which has no graphical user interface. But we are interested in natural light sources where it uses the Paris sky model, which can deal also with diffuse conditions properly. And after the simulation, if it is done, we have results given watts per square meter, which then can be transformed in other indicators such as the PAR, the photosynthetic active radiation, shading rate, or whatever wants it. On top of radiance, there's a tool called bifacial radiance, which was developed by NREL in the United States. It combines several libraries specialized for PV power plants. But most importantly, it provides optimized procedures for inputs like albedo values, system geometry, time snips, or meteorological data, such as incident radiation variables. And also important, it works on an hourly resolution. An additional nice feature is a basic visualization tool where scenes and their shadow can be investigated. This is especially useful to double-check the entered input parameters. As a virtual plant, I used PCSE, which is an acronym for Python Crop Simulation Environment. And this library works on a daily basis. The underlying model is called WOFOST, which is again an acronym meaning World Food Studies. It gives indication how much light can be absorbed by the plants to do photosynthesis at given boundary conditions such as crop type, soil properties, agromanagement, or reduced model. WOFOST comes along with 3 models with different detailing levels of the input. The potential production model assumes that the plant is only limited in its growth by light. The water limited production model has the constraints regarding water availability, whereas the nutrient limited production model also includes shortages in nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. In the picture, we can see a flow diagram of its variables. We are mostly interested in the net assimilation rate, since we want to know how much light the plant can process at any point in time. Now, I will tell you some assumptions which I use for our scenarios. Regarding the time frame, I decided to take the years 2017 and 2018. This is due to the used geometry, which I took from an already existing research facility. It is located in southern Germany, Baden-Württemberg, near the Lake of Constance in a small village called Tegelbach. In the picture, you can see it. The orientation was chosen as such that it minimizes light heterogeneity on ground and has fixed tilt panels. You can also see that some plant experiments were conducted there, and I used some data of those to compare it with my simulation results. In this work, I used the crop potato. I further assume that the power plant is infinitely large, such that I can assume periodic boundary conditions without border effects. I also assume that light rejection is the only factor changing on ground regarding the presence of the PV system. This light reduction I assume to be homogeneous on the whole plot during the optimization. And I go even further. If plants suggest to be shaded, for example, by 40% at a specific day, this should also be valid every single hour on that day. So, in short, if we look at this picture, we can easily imagine that the shading is quite heterogeneous between the sensors indicated by the red squares. But during the optimization, the irradiation value for the crop model is the mean out of all of them. So, yeah, in PCSE, I use the water limited production model, since potatoes are water limited crops. The crop model serves as a proxy for plant needs and is not calibrated. This work is rather about the different tracking schemes. So now you will see more of this drawing, so I'll explain it shortly. The blue rectangles represent elevated solar cells. In this scenario, they are fixed and spaced southwest, representing an azimuth of 225 degrees and a tilt of 20 degrees. The red dots indicate sensor points, the place where the light simulation results are generated. 20 sensors are placed inside, representing the light distribution in the whole system. 2 sensors are placed far outside the agrivoltaic system and serve as a reference. They should never be shaded. This scenario represents the research facility one by one, such that a comparison with its result is possible. In this scenario, I assume the same geometry, but the panels as tracked. I also adjusted the orientation by 45 degrees, since leaving them in the same orientation would not be reasonable considering the movement of the sun. The panels then try to maximize the incident irradiation on themselves, correlating with the maximization of the electricity output. This happens regardless of crop needs. So this changes now in scenario 3, where the panels are tracked as such that crop yields were maximized, now regardless of electricity production. This is now a bit more challenging. This works day by day and step by step. It starts at the first day of the cropping period. At this day, the light availability is altered from 0 to 100%. Then a simulation runs until the end of the cropping period for each of the 10% increments, resulting in a crop yield. A polynomial is interpolated between these points and the maximal crop yield and its respective light availability is chosen. Now the panels know what to do. They have to shade the crops by a certain percentage. This procedure is then repeated until the last day of the cropping period. Again, so here I put the procedure into numbers. On the x-axis, we see the light availability from 0 to 100% at a specific day, here with our multiplication by 100. On the y-axis, we see the crop yield TWSO, which is an acronym for total weight of storage organs at the end of the cropping period. For each 10%, step 1 simulation is run, and the maximum of the curve then represents the wanted light availability by the crop. This can then be told to the PV system how much shading it should provide. On the x-axis of this plot, we see the delta theta, indicating the deviation from the PV optimum. On the y-axis, we see the respective shading degree at certain angles. The shading degree is just the opposite of light availability, so 1 minus light availability times 100 in the current case. The orange line represents what is possible in a specific hour with the given PV system. The blue line represents then the wanted value. In this case, we need to move it down to a shading degree of 60% and find the intersection point with the green curve. This then results in tilting the panel by 40 degrees. This last scenario tries to maximize the system value to achieve highest amount of dual yields. The objective function looks like this during one time step. TWSO again represents the crop yield, H represents the incident irradiation on ground, and the W's represent the weights of the respective resource. TWSO and H need to be normalized to ensure equal weighting of both resources firsthand. W's were set to 1 in this work, and now we can do the same thing as before. Determine the wanted light availability and track the panels accordingly. Finally, we can use the measure LER, the land equivalent ratio, which is a measure for land use efficiency, to assess our scenarios. The formula looks like this. It compares coupled production on the same plot with single production. To be fair, in agrivoltaics, we also need to subtract the I loss term, since some land is lost due to the mounting structure. In this work, this parameter is about 8.7%. Yeah, and the LER value, if it is greater than 1, it is recommended to go for the coupled production. The calculations were performed for all scenarios. Now I am showing you the results of the scenario. I took the system value optimization of 2017. In the left graph, you can see the development of crop yield over time, starting with sowing, indicated with the vertical green line, and harvesting, indicated by the vertical red line. The crop yield on the y-axis is normalized with the blue graph. It represents the reference simulation without reduced irradiation through the PV system. When the PV system is there, we can observe a crop yield increase to 104.2% compared to 100% in the reference case. On the right graph, we see the spatial distribution of crop yield. I run a simulation for every sensor between the rows on ground and normalize it with the results from the average simulation. In this left graph, we can see the comparison between wanted light availability by the plants, which is the black line, and the actually achieved one on ground. We can see that the PV system, that the PV panels cannot provide as much shade as suggested by the crop model. The reference light availability is also there, indicated with the blue line at the top, and always at a level of 100%. The right plot shows the soil moisture starting already at the beginning of the year. The blue line is again the reference case, whereas the orange line represents the simulation inside of the agrivoltaic system. I want to point out here that the soil moisture inside of the agrivoltaic system remains constantly at a higher level throughout the crop period. Here we see the results of the same setup, but with a different year. The crop yield is now increased to a level of 118.3%, and it's also way less distributed spatially. The PV system can still not shade as much as suggested, and we still see the same pattern with increased soil moisture throughout the cropping period. We even start at a higher level already before the crop is even planted. And here we can see the results for the incident irradiation on the solar panels. The front side is represented through the blue bars, the rear side is through the orange bars. The caption then adds the two bars together. If we compare the 2 years, we can see that 2018 had quite high irradiation values in April compared to 2017. In general, 2018 was a very hot and dry year. Okay, and I also want to show you the following plots which explain the consequences of the previous assumptions and the connection of the investigated variables. Displayed is always 1 day, and the corresponding hours where light from the sky is available according to the input data. So night hours are always excluded. The time steps are listed on the x-axis in the format month, day, hour. On the y-axis, we can see the shadowing degree on ground in percent at the corresponding hour for different variables. The first variables which I want to point out is the maximum and the minimum shading degree, which can be provided by the solar panels. The legend refers to it with the entry SD_min and SD_max. The area between those curves then marks the area that is controllable by tilting the solar panel, indicated in light blue. If we want to achieve other shading degrees than outside this area, this would not be possible to achieve with the current system. SD_up represents then the shading degree wanted by the crops for 1 day according to the crop model. It is a straight line since we said a shading degree for 1 day should be reflected in every hour. The orange line then shows how the tracking scheme was able to follow this orange line. If it's not achievable, it uses the next possible shading degree. It refers either to maximal possible parallelity or perpendicularity towards incident irradiation. The left plot shows an average day with some cloudy hours. The right plot a sunny day. It needs to be noted that shading degrees are relative values. In the morning and in the evening, we have lower irradiation values, but more possibilities to control the shading degrees, whereas during noon, we have high irradiation values, but lower controlling possibilities. So, this now leads me to the assessment of the scenarios with LER values. They are listed on the x-axis and their respective formats can be seen at the y-axis. The left graph represents 2017, the right one 2018. Green represents crop yields and yellow the incident irradiation on the panels. For the first scenario, the fixed tilt one, we see already quite high crop yields, but comparably low incident irradiation on the panels. This is the same in both years. In the other scenarios, we can see that they have almost the same LER value, but the shifting between crop yields and incident irradiation is possible through a certain extent. If we now compare the simulation results with reality, we can see that we end up in the same range regarding the LER value, but some deviations can be observed, like plus 4.8% in 2017 and minus 11.3% in 2018. Okay. So it's inevitable to have a modeling environment reflecting crop needs in partial shaded conditions to assess the performance of agrivoltaic systems. And PCSE and bifacial radiance seem to be appropriate tools for it. An interesting aspect is the soil moisture, because it is the suspected reason for the increased crop yields in the agrivoltaic system. Regarding the tracking schemes, it's a nice feature that it is possible that the output of the system can be adjusted depending on the worth of the yields in some range. Tracking schemes increase LER values if light is managed properly. Some sentences to the 4 scenarios, here again listed with numbers. The fixed tilt scenario performs poorest because too less light hits the solar panels. The scenario where electricity is maximized performs best because the most shading is applied, which increases the soil moisture and therefore crop yields. Maximizing crop yields leads actually to the highest agricultural yields, but cannot compensate for less irradiation on panels too much. But again, all tracking schemes are on the same level of LER values. So now finally some conclusions. The combination of PCSE and bifacial radiance works out, but the only factor considering the existence of the agrivoltaic system was light reduction. For future research, maybe also other factors need to be taken into account. Hourly time steps are inevitable to improve tracking and the consideration of plant needs with more accuracy. And a calibrated crop model is needed to report absolute crop yield predictions. Weather files should be improved if operations should be realized in real time. The water resource should be investigated further, since it seems to play an important role and seems to be the reason for crop yield increases. And also the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence can also improve tracking schemes and crop yield predictions. And finally, dynamic albedo values might be interesting for bifacial PV systems. So this was it for today, and now I'm happy to receive some questions.
Thank you, Leonard Kfulner, for the presentation. אני שמח מאוד, במיוחד להציג את הדוברת הבאה, דוקטור אסתר לוצטו, מנכ"לית קבוצת לוצטו. כמי שמנהלת שיחות עם לקוחות באופן יומי במשך למעלה מ-30 שנה, דוקטור אסתר לוצטו רכשה ראייה פנורמית וייחודית של נוף הקניין הריחוני ועולם העסקים בארץ ובחו"ל. דבר שמסייע לה בהדרכת לקוחות בשלבים הראשונים של מסע הקניין הרוחני שלהם, ומלווה אותם לאורך מחזור החיים של המיזם שלהם. בהרצאתה, החדשנות הייחודית והקניין הרוחני שנוצרים בפרויקטים של אגרו-וולטאי, היא תדבר על נקודות ההשקה בין אגרוטק לאנרגיה חלופית, והשילוב ביניהם, שמייצר עולם תוכן שלישי של חדשנות שאינה קיימת בכל אחד מהתחומים בלבד. סינרגיזם. דוקטור אסתר לוצטו, בבקשה.
אני אקח ביד אולי. אני יכולה ביד לקחת את המיקרופון? אני חושבת שיהיה יותר נוח. אוקיי. יום טוב לכולם. אני מקווה שכולם ערניים ובקשב, אחרי כל כך הרבה הרצאות מעניינות. אני אנסה לגוע מזוויות אחרות קצת ביחס למה ששמענו. הטכנולוגיה זה בעצם עיקר העניין, ואני בעצם נותנת זווית נוספת של שילוב של חדשנות טכנולוגית וקניין רוחני, שזה פועל יוצא של חדשנות טכנולוגית, בתחום של חקלאות ואנרגיה חלופית, אנרגיה סולרית. רק שנייה. אני אתן אולי מושגי יסוד שמדברים על קניין רוחני. קודם כל, בעולמות שאנחנו חיים היום, בעידן של היום, אז בעצם אנחנו לוקחים עולמות שהיו קיימים באופן בלתי תלוי, כמו למשל חקלאות ואנרגיה חלופית, לא תמיד היה ביניהם קשר, ובעידן של היום, באמצעות הטכנולוגיה, אנחנו יכולים לחבר בין עולמות מאוד גדולים, ולקבל איזושהי תוצאה סינרגיסטית, תוצאה שהיא הרבה יותר גדולה מכל אחד בנפרד והחיבור של שני התחומים. במקביל לתחום הזה, אני יכולה לתת דוגמה נוספת שכמובן היום אני לא אכנס אליה, אבל גם לה יש אימפקט מאוד חזק, למשל שלקחו את הנושא של רפואה והעולם הדיגיטלי, וחיברו ביניהם, ובעצם אנחנו חיים בעידן של רפואה דיגיטלית, שהוא עולם בפני עצמו. בין השאר, אחד האימפקטים של זה, שהיום אפשר לעשות רפואה מרחוק, מה שאי אפשר היה לעשות בעבר, וההתפתחות הדיגיטלית מאפשרת לעשות את זה היום. אז זה רק דוגמה, והיא דוגמה מקבילה לעולמות של חקלאות ואנרגיה חלופית, שבאמצעות של חדשנות טכנולוגית ופיתוח טכנולוגי, אנחנו מקבלים תוצאה הרבה יותר דרמטית מכל אחד בנפרד, ממה שהיה לנו עד עכשיו בנפרד בכל אחד מהתחומים האלה. אז כשאני מדברת על חדשנות טכנולוגית, אני בעצם מדברת על יצירה של קניין רוחני. אבל מה זה קניין רוחני? העולם הזה של קניין רוחני, בעצם הקניין הרוחני, אני אתייחס בעיקר היום על פטנטים, כי זה מה שזה רלוונטי מבחינת הפיתוחים שנעשים בתחומים האלה. הקניין הרוחני או הפטנטים זה כמו טרנספורם, שאתה מפתח איזשהו משהו טכנולוגי, מתרגם את זה לפטנט, והפטנט מקנה את הזכות הבלעדית לחדשנות הטכנולוגית שיצרנו. אז אם ככה, כשאני מדברת על קניין רוחני, אז אנחנו בעצם מתייחסים, הקניין הרוחני הוא משהו לא מוחשי, הוא ארטילאי, אפשר להגדיר אותו, אפשר להעביר אותו, ויש לו קיום forever. הדבר החשוב שמדברים על העולם של הקניין רוחני, שבדרך כלל, אני שוב אתייחס לפטנטים, הם טריטוריאליים. זאת אומרת שבכל מדינה שאני ארצה שיהיה לי נניח פטנט, מי שמעניק את הפטנט זו המדינה. לכל מדינה יש רשות פטנטים, אני מגישה בקשה של פטנט ויש פורמט מסוים שהוא אחיד בכל העולם, אני מגישה לרשות הפטנטים, יש לה בוחנים מטעם המדינה, והבוחנים בוחנים את הבקשה לפטנט, בדרך כלל זה מספר שנים עד קבלת פטנט, וברגע שקיבלתי את הפטנט במדינה מסוימת, זה מקנה לי מונופולין, בלעדיות. זה אומר שאף אחד לא יכול לעשות שימוש, לא למכור, לא לייצר, לא לעשות שום שימוש, אלא ברישיון של בעל הפטנט. מכאן זה הופך להיות נכס מאוד מאוד חשוב לחברות. ואני חושבת אם יש הסיפור, ההצלחה הגדול של ההייטק בישראל, זה שחברות הצליחו ליצור חדשנות טכנולוגית ייחודית, שהקדימה את האחרים בעולם, הגנו על זה, וכך בעצם לא אפשרו למישהו אחר לעשות שימוש במה שהם פיתחו. וזה כלי מאוד חשוב לאיזון של כוחות בלתי שקולים. זאת אומרת, גם אם אני חברה קטנה של אנשים ספורים, ופיתחתי איזשהו פיתוח ייחודי והגנתי עליו, במדינה שהגנתי עליה, אף אחד אחר, גם לא חברות ענק, לא יכלו לעשות שימוש במה שאנחנו פיתחנו. מכאן יש חשיבות מאוד גדולה לחברות, אפילו חשיבות קיומית, בעיקר בעידן של הכפר הגלובלי, שהמידע זורם בקצבים מאוד מהירים, יש חשיבות אולי ראשונית, קריטית, קיומית, להגן על מה שאנחנו פיתחנו. יותר מזה, לחברות ההייטק, מבחינת יכולת הגיוס שלהם, של לגייס השקעות, בין השאר, אחת השאלות הראשונות שנשאלים, זה האם הגנתם על הפיתוח או הטכנולוגיה שאתם כרגע פיתחתם. עכשיו, זכויות של קניין רוחני מתייחסות לרעיונות, המצאות, אני גם אציין דברים נוספים חוץ מפטנטים שמתייחסים לקניין רוחני, וההתייחסות המשפטית לחדשנות פטנטים שהיא בעיקר פטנט, צריכים לעמוד בקריטריונים שהם כלל עולמיים. כדי שאני אוכל להגן על איזשהו רעיון, הוא חייב להיות חדש בעולם. לכן השאלה הראשונה שנשאלת של go no go, זה האם זה חדש או לא חדש בעולם. וזו הבדיקה הראשונה שאנחנו בעצם עושים. אנחנו עושים חיפושים במאגרים הגלויים, כדי לראות קודם כל אם זה חדש או לא חדש, וגם חשוב לנו לראות מה קיים מסביב, כדי לבדל את עצמנו ממה שקיים, ולהיות יותר מפוקסים בפיתוח החדשנות כבר בשלבים ראשונים. אם ככה, קניין רוחני מתייחס למוניטין, סימני מסחר, ידע, זכויות יוצרים, עיצובים, גם זכויות מטפחים בחקלאות, וכמו שאני אמרתי, פטנטים. 80% מהערך המצרפי של חברות ציבוריות מבוסס על קניין רוחני. זאת אומרת שבהחלט לחברות הערך שלהם, הציבורי, נקבע בעיקר לפי הערך של הקניין הרוחני שהם בנו. עכשיו אנחנו נלך לעניין של האגרו-וולטאי. זאת אומרת שלוקחים עולם של חקלאות, שהוא וגם האנרגיה הסולרית, לוקחים שני עולמות של מדיום לואו-טק. זאת אומרת, זה לא משהו של הייטק פיור, מחברים ביניהם באמצעות טכנולוגיה שמאפשרת לחבר ביניהם, ובעצם אנחנו מקבלים עולם חדש. והעולם החדש זה שאתם לוקחים משטחים חקלאיים, והופכים אותם, א', מזה שהם יכולים גם לייצר אנרגיה, למשטחים חכמים. והיום, באמצעים של היום, אתם יכולים להפוך את כל השדה באמצעות חיישנים, באמצעות ניטור, באמצעים טכנולוגיים אחרים. יש לנו גם נדלן של פאנלים שעליו אנחנו יכולים להלביש דברים נוספים, כמו למשל צילומים של לצלם את השדה, לראות מקרוב ברזולוציות היום כמעט אבסולוטיות, שאפשר להגיע גם בצילום, גם במדידות של חיישנים, גם סנסורים שמודדים כל הזמן. זה הופך להיות משטחים שנותנים הרבה מאוד אינפורמציה, ועם כל האינפורמציה הזאת אנחנו יכולים להביא לתוצאות משופרות בכל התחומים. בעיקר, כמו שראינו גם היום, בהרצאות ששמענו, איך משפרים את התוצרת פר שטח, איך יש לנו שליטה כמעט אבסולוטית, כמעט בכל פרמטר שאנחנו יכולים לעלות על הדעת, כשתוסיפו לזה גם את ההנדסה הגנטית, שאנחנו יכולים ליצור מראש זנים שצריכים לעמוד בתנאים מסוימים שבשדה שאנחנו רוצים, ואנחנו בעצם מגיעים לשליטה מוחלטת בשדה חכם, כשאנחנו בעצם בכל מה שאמרתי כאן, יוצרים הרבה מאוד קניין רוחני בתחומים האלה. וכמובן שכמו בהרבה דברים, למדינת ישראל אין ספק שיש יתרון מאוד גדול ביצירה של חדשנות טכנולוגית. אתם יודעים, אנחנו הרבה פעמים נשאלים, מה באמת הפך את ישראל למעצמה של חדשנות טכנולוגית? כי אני חושבת שבכל הפרמטרים, על פני 3 עשורים, מדינת ישראל היא בין המדינות המובילות בחדשנות טכנולוגית. אז אין ספק שזה מבוסס על לפחות 4 עוגנים, שהם מאפיינים את השוק בישראל, והחיסרון הכי גדול שלנו הפך ליתרון הכי גדול, זה הגודל, שזה בסופו של יום שוק קטן, שיש בו רמה של אנשים, של הון אנושי מאוד גבוה, ו4 העוגנים, מבלי להיכנס, כי זה, כל עוגן כאן זה הסבר ארוך וזה, 4 העוגנים זה קודם כל באמת מערכת הביטחון, שמכשירה ומשקיעה באנשים לתקופה יחסית ארוכה, והמשך השרשרת הזאת זה התעשיות הביטחוניות, שגם כן ברמה מאוד גבוהה של גם של אנשים, גם של ידע, יש לזה אימפקט, כל השרשרת הזאת בשוק, אימפקט מאוד חזק, אבל אחד הדברים החשובים שמדינת ישראל תמיד היא בין 3 המקומות הראשונים בעולם, בשיתוף פעולה בין אקדמיה לבין תעשייה. מסתבר שלאקדמיה יש תפקיד מאוד מאוד חשוב ביצירה של חדשנות טכנולוגית, במיוחד כשזה בא בשיתוף פעולה עם התעשייה, וכולם נהנים מזה, התעשייה מקבלת מידע מהון אנושי איכותי לצרכים שלה, והאקדמיה מרוויחה מזה שהרבה מחקרים יכולים להיות ממומנים דרך התעשייה. ישראל היא בין אחת מ3 המקומות הראשונים בעולם הזה, והוא מאוד חשוב, גם מאוד רלוונטי לעולמות האלה שלנו היום. כשמזהים שיש את היתרונות האלה, אז חברות רב-לאומיות מגיעות לפה, ויותר מ-400 חברות רב-לאומיות פתחו בישראל מרכזי מחקר ופיתוח, הם מעסיקים למעלה מ-300,000 עובדים, כשעל כל עובד נוצרות עוד 3 משרות. זאת אומרת, הכסף של החברות הרב-לאומיות שנמצאות כאן, כמזהות שלישראל יש יתרון, והדבר אולי החשוב ביותר זה הכסף הפרטי. הכסף הפרטי שמזהה שפה יש אקוסיסטם שהוא מאוד חריג, מאוד יוצא דופן, בישראל רק בשנה שעברה, ב-2021, חברות הסטארט-אפ בישראל גייסו למעלה מ-$21 מיליארד, שזה בכל קנה מידה, ישראל היא תמיד במקום השני, שלישי, אחרי ארצות הברית, בגיוסים פרטיים, מבלי לנרמל את גודל האוכלוסייה. אז זה ככה על רגל אחת, כדי שתבינו באיזה עוצמות ובאיזה היקפים התעשייה של החדשנות הטכנולוגית קיימת בישראל, וזה משליך כמעט בכל התחומים, וכמובן שהתחום הזה של האגרו, שעכשיו נמצא בנסיקה, והחדשנות הטכנולוגית, אני חושבת שיוצרים וקטור מאוד חזק, שאין ספק שזה אחד מהענפים שהרבה מאוד כסף, כבר רואים את זה, מתחיל להיות מושקע בעולמות האלה. מה אנחנו? איפה? כשאומרים על חדשנות טכנולוגית בתחום הזה של האגרו-וולטאי, אז כמובן שזה חוץ מהשיפורים והיעילות בפאנלים הסולריים, שאנחנו איפשהו כבר כמעט באסימפטוטה, וגם בחקלאות שיש בו הרבה מאוד חידושים, ובעיקר במדידות ובניטור ובזנים בהנדסה גנטית. לצד זה, אז כמובן הרבה מאוד פיתוח של בינה מלאכותית, של תקשורת והפעלה מרחוק, של טכנולוגיות שקשורות לצורה של הקטיף כתוצאה ממגבלות כאלה או אחרות, וכמו שאמרתי, שימוש בנדלן חדש שנוצר בשדה הזה, שאנחנו הופכים את המשטחים החקלאיים למשטחים חכמים. למה זה? רגע. זה גם וגם? אוקיי. אני חושבת ש... אוקיי. בסדר. מכאן אנחנו כרגע נמצאים באמת בעידן שמאתגר בעולמות האלה, ויוצא שכמו שאמרתי קודם, התעשיות שהיו קודם המדיום לואו-טק נכנסות גם הן כשחקניות עם יצירת החדשנות הטכנולוגית, והמשמעות לחברות האלה שההטמעה של חדשנות טכנולוגית בחברה מעלה את הפריון בתחומים של חקלאות, שתמיד הייתה בעיה של ביחס לתעשיות הטכנולוגיות של פריון מאוד נמוך, אז אין ספק שההטמעה של חדשנות טכנולוגית מעלה את הפריון, משפרת את התפוקות, את היכולת התחרות שלנו בשווקים, וכמובן מגדילה את המחזורים של החברות האלה. דבר מאוד חשוב לגבי קניין רוחני שאמרתי, בסופו של יום קניין רוחני משקף את האסטרטגיה של החברה. זאת אומרת שכמו שאמרתי גם קניין רוחני הוא טריטוריאלי, אז חשוב לדעת איפה השוק, איפה מייצרים, למי, איפה מוכרים. בשלבים מאוד מוקדמים גם אנחנו צריכים לפעמים לראות בעיניים של שותף אסטרטגי, כי בחלק גדול מהמקרים שותף אסטרטגי בסוף יקנה את החברה הליך שתתפתח, וצריך לראות, לצפות פני עתיד, לראות מהשותפים האסטרטגיים שירכשו את החברה הזאת, וכבר בשלבים מוקדמים לתכנן את האסטרטגיה של הקניין הרוחני בעיניים האלה. איפה הם יהיו השחקנים העיקריים האלה, ומי המתחרים שלהם. מכיוון ששימו לב, קניין רוחני בזה שהוא מקנה מונופולין בלעדיות, אז אני בעצם יכולה לחסום מתחרים, גם שלי או של השותפים שלי שיהיו בעתיד. מכאן זה משחק שיש לו הרבה מאוד השלכות לטווח רחוק. אגב, חיים של פטנט הם 21 שנה מיום הגשת הבקשה. אז זה הרבה מאוד שנים, זאת אומרת, עד שהטכנולוגיה כבר כמעט לא רלוונטית, זה זמן מאוד ארוך במושגים של היום, אז אין ספק שיש לזה ערך, ומכאן החשיבות של הקניין הרוחני. אם יש שאלות, אני מאוד אשמח. תודה.
תודה לדוקטור אסתר לוצטו. בהחלט אנחנו בפני חזית חדשה של חקלאות ואנרגיה, וזה ייצר הרבה הזדמנויות. הדובר הבא זה דור שוורץ. דור שוורץ הוא מנהל מוצר גלובלי של פתרונות סולריים בחברת נטפים. נטפים, כידוע, חברת ההשקיה הגדולה בעולם וחברת פתרונות השקיה. בהרצאתו דור יזכור את ההזדמנויות הטמונות באגרו-וולטאי ואת ההשפעה על סביבת הגידול החקלאי. הוא יתאר לנו כיצד נטפים משלבת ומביאה לידי ביטוי את יכולתיה ופתרונותיה תוך התאמת הטכנולוגיות המתקדמות לסביבה החדשה. הוא גם יציג לנו מקרה בוחן פורץ דרך שמתאר הלכה למעשה כיצד נטפים הפכה האתגר של הקמת גידול חקלאי מניב מתחת לשדה סולרי קיים, 8,000 דונם, 800 הקטר בסין, ומקסימו את תפוקות האנרגיה הסולריות. זיו, דור, בבקשה.
תודה רבה, צהריים טובים לכולם. ראשית כל ברכות לכל מארגני הכנס וכל מי שלקח חלק בארגון של האירוע היוצא דופן הזה. שמי דור שוורץ, אני עובד בחברת נטפים בעשור האחרון במגוון של תפקידים בצד הטכנולוגי והמסחרי, וכיום כמו שהציגו אותי אני מנהל מוצרים ומרכז את כל התחום הסולרי בחברת נטפים בפן הגלובלי, והיום אני כאן לדבר איתכם על שני דברים עיקריים. למה ואיך לקדם אגרי-וולטאי בצורה הטובה ביותר. אני אעזר במקרה בוחן מהשנים האחרונות כפי שאריק הזכיר, ונסכם באיזושהי מסגרת כללית למגוון הפתרונות שנטפים יודעת להביא היום כחבילה פרויקטלית לתחום הזה של אגרי-וולטאי. אבל לפני שנצלול לאגרי-וולטאי ולטובת אלה שלא מכירים את חברת נטפים, אז על קצה המזלג חברת נטפים היא חברת ההשקיה הגדולה בעולם, מציעה מגוון של פתרונות השקיה כחלק מהמאבק במחסור במים, קרקע ומזון, על מנת להבטיח לכולנו ולדורות הבאים שאחרינו עתיד בר קיימא. בשקף שאתם רואים אפשר לראות את מגוון הפתרונות שאנחנו מציעים, החל משלב הטיפול במים, הגירה של מים, מערכות, ראשי מערכת, צינון, וכמובן מערכת ההשקיה עצמה על שלל מרכיביה, כשבשנים האחרונות נוספו בקצה השרשרת כל הנושא הדיגיטלי, שמאוד מאוד חשוב באגרי-וולטאי, אני אגע בזה גם במסגרת מקרה הבוחן שאני אציג, כל הנושא של איסוף וניטור מידע, כחלק מהדואליות הזה, בעצם להזין את הצד הסולרי בנתונים חיים מהשטח. מבחינת המודלים העסקיים רבים ומגוונים, החברה בשנים האחרונות הקימה גם יחידה של שירותים ופרויקטים, בקנה מידה מפרויקטים קטנים ועד לגבי מגה פרויקטים בארץ ובעולם, כמו המקרה בוחן שנציג. סרטון קצרצר ונצלול לאגרי-וולטאי.
More than 50 years ago, Netafim was founded on a small kibbutz in Israel and introduced drip irrigation to the world. Drop by drop, field by field, we have become the world's largest irrigation company, leading the drip irrigation revolution and helping the world grow more with less. With its end-to-end smart irrigation solutions, Netafim offers a diverse portfolio of products and services that address every need, from the water source to the plant's root. Starting with unique financing capabilities and best-in-class planning, through leading agronomic and technical know-how, to cutting-edge innovative irrigation technology. We will accelerate the growth and drive mass adoption of smart irrigation solutions by investing significant efforts and resources in developing emerging markets, deploying large-scale irrigation projects, and increasing the penetration in commodity crops. Netafim is leading the way into the future, in which sophisticated robots and automated systems will drive simplicity in irrigation, reducing the dependence on working hands and natural resources. Advanced sensors, satellites, and data management systems will help farmers to control and monitor their fields from the palm of their hands, facilitating precise agriculture and allowing them to benefit from better yield and greater peace of mind. Together with our partners for success, we will lead the change for a sustainable future. Netafim. Grow more with less.
מחקרים מראים שיישום אגרי-וולטאי ב-1% מהשטחים החקלאיים ייתן מענה מלא לצריכת החשמל הגלובלית. זה לא רק מוטיבציה מאוד גבוהה, זה גם צו השעה של כולנו לקחת חלק באירוע היוצא דופן הזה. ומעבר לזה אנחנו צריכים לזהות ולראות מה היתרונות ומהם ההזדמנויות באגרי-וולטאי. לאורך היום בשלל ההרצאות המעניינות שראיתם, הוצגו לא מעט סיבות. אני דווקא רוצה ללכת לצד הימני ולהסתכל מנקודת המבט של הגידול עצמו, ומעל הכל העובדה שמתקיימת מערכת דינמית מעל הגידולים, מאפשרת לנו כחברה עם ניסיון אגרונומי לשלוט ברמת האנרגיה ולווסת את רמת האנרגיה והקרינה שמגיעה אל הגידול עצמו. ובכך לאורך מחזור החיים של הגידול אנחנו יכולים לשלוט ולמקסם את היבול של הגידול עצמו. כמובן שמשוואה אחת לא נכונה לגבי כל הגידולים וצריך לעשות אופטימיזציה, אבל זה בהחלט הזדמנות שאנחנו מזהים ורוצים לתקוף אותה בצורה הטובה ביותר. מעבר לזה, נושא של צמצום במים, הגנה מפני קרה וחמסין שהוזכרו לאורך היום, הם בהחלט הזדמנויות מאוד משמעותיות. ובאופן כללי, הדואליות הזאת מאפשרת לנו כחברה של פתרונות ומוצרי השקיה, להתלבש על אותה קונסטרוקציה של ה-PV, ובעצם למקסם את הדואליות הזאת בצורה מיטבית. גם מבחינת הפאנלים עצמם, מבלי להתייחס לכל אחת מהנקודות, העובדה שמתקיים גידול מתחת...
company in China that has established an 800 hectare field, solar field. It's huge in Nijuan, and it was placed at a height of 3 meters. This it's 7/9. The spacing is 7/9, and the type of soil was sandy loam. But they approached Netafim with a problem. The problem is because of the sandy environment, the amount of dust that that came up from the sands and exposed the panels. This reduced the energy outputs, and that was the problem. And this is the problem with which the customer came to Netafim. So we as a company faced 3 main challenges in order to resolve this at the best possible way. First of all, which crop could be suitable? It's not a traditional area, so we had to choose the most appropriate crop. The second one is the planning stage and the irrigation system, and of course, ultimately the execution and monitoring of the entire project. So like everything, especially in Israel, it's divided into 3 parts: design and planning, execution, and operations and maintenance. So in the first stage, we need to choose the most appropriate crop. After an agronomic and commercial analysis, we decided on goji berry. Goji berry is the most famous superfood in China, and it delays aging, and it helps prevent cancer and improves eyesight. So another thing you've just learned from my talk, just stop at a store nearby that sells natural goods and buy goji berry. And it had great feasibility, and it's also very tolerant for shading. So this is the crop that was chosen. The second stage is to take the crop and the conditions of the solar field and to think which is the best system that can be placed in that territory cell. And here you can see This is every section of this area and how we calculate the shading percentage as well as the irrigation system. The drip that was chosen here, drip irrigation, is one of the cornerstones, one of the most basic elements of Netafim. And the entire planning of an irrigation system, that's Netafim's bread and butter. This is something we've been doing for decades. It's not that different when you do it in agrivoltaics, but there are certain adaptations that need to be made. And the drip we decided to go for had been adapted over time. And through the digital tools we had, we could monitor and follow up on the performance. And then there's execution. So we said, first of all, a solar field was built. So to enter with tractors and heavy tools like we usually do, that's impossible because we have a glass ceiling, 3 meters, and that's actually our challenge. You can see the pictures to the left, some of the solutions that we needed to take into account. This is a mini tractor. This is where the dividing pipe comes in, and on the other side there are cranes and heavy structure and the pump room, and this is all orchestrated by a Netafim project manager who makes sure that this all progresses according to the schedule and is up to the expectations of the client. And now the panel is not a Netafim product, but it's one of the services that we bring to the package, and by and large our motivation is to make sure that you can be quiet about everything that's happening with the panel. We live your area of expertise to you, and we are simply orchestrating this entire project. And finally, it doesn't end the project on the delivery date. I believe that the most interesting part actually starts at the delivery date, and everything is based on the sensors that are out there, humidity measure, etc., irradiation meter, and the irrigation systems that we started out with have been adapted over time with the irrigation times in order to best adapt it to the agrivoltaic requirements. And we couldn't have done it if we wouldn't have collected data 24/7. This was a very interesting and fascinating project. Now let's look at the results 2 years after it was delivered to the customer. So after 2 years, we already had a return on the investment, and they started profiting from this, reducing the dust and sand that swirls up from the land. It was reduced significantly, so the output increased. The fact that we managed to grow a high-yielding, thriving crop, in this case, goji berry, under solar panels, this is very important for us as an agricultural company, and ultimately I can already tell you that today we're at phase 2 of this project, an additional 300 hectares with the same solar company, and here we're growing alfalfa in China as well. So this is a very good example from recent years on how we take standard services that we offer in Netafim and adapt them for the benefit of the agrivoltaic environment. In this last slide, you can see the entire array of solutions which we offer beyond what I just presented in this project in China. I have to say that we need to examine every project individually. There are certain things that suit one area, one crop, but it won't suit another area or a different crop. And we definitely consider this to be a very important goal. And we utilize the project-based capabilities we've acquired over the years, as well as our services capabilities. And it's all based on precision irrigation systems, whether it's drip irrigation, sprinkling, etc. And we are bringing these traditional methods into this innovative world, including a system for washing solar panels. And we know there is a great need for these solutions, and we do so whether if it's on rooftops or on agrivoltaic. And we definitely consider this to be an important part, of course, in order to improve the energy output. So I'd like to call upon everyone from here, think about the why, focus on the how. You're more than welcome to challenge us to even visit our Center for Precision Irrigation at Kibbutz Magal. We'll be very happy to have you come visit us. Thank you very much, and good luck, everyone. Thank you very much, Dor. Well, we were supposed to now hear a talk by Mr. Koji Nishi from the Solar Federation of Japan. But due to technical difficulties, we won't be able to show his video now. We'll do it at a different time. So this concludes this session, Industry and Technology session. And now I'm honored to invite Nissan Zeevi from Margalit, a startup city, in order to launch the startup session. Nissan, please. So I think that this is the session with the greatest amount of innovation and interest. I recommend that you all stay with us for this session. Well, I know it's a difficult hour, but what we're going to see over this upcoming hour is various prominent agrovoltaic startups. Part of the activity that we're leading here with Migal and some others, the municipality of Kiryat Shmona and Upper Galilee and the Galilee Development Authority, to turn this region into an excelling region in this field. We even have a podium here, so this is serious. We're Margalit Startup City, part of a chain of JVP, the JVP Foundation. If you haven't heard about it, it's one of the oldest venture capital funds in Israel. We are managing $1.5 billion in investments, 38 exits and IPOs. And the area that most interests us now is this connection between agriculture, food, energy, and climate. And we are developing innovation centers beyond the area between Gedera to Hedera. And the center we're most proud of is that in the center of Kiryat Shmona, an innovation center, which is an outcome of a very unique ecosystem that's been established here in recent years that connects academic research, industry, government ministries, private organizations, and to create a new excellence center here in the Galilee. What you see on the map here is the city of Kiryat Shmona. The screen isn't big enough to include the dozens of other communities in the region who are somehow connected to food tech, agrotech, and of course to agrivoltaic that is going to be gaining momentum in the near future. And now we've recently built an innovation center. We bought this pretty ugly building at the center of Kiryat Shmona. We've worked very hard in this past year in order to build the most northern innovation center in Israel, which is about a 10-minute walk from here, or 10 minutes from here. This is a home for a lot of international players and various government agencies. And the beating heart of this center is a very unique startup program in Israel. It's not an accelerator or an incubator. Areas such as climate tech, food tech, agrovoltaic require a different perspective. So this is called Startup Studio. We imported this model from the US. Our startup studio is called Studio Galil. And Studio Galil is a unique platform that enables to design for every company that's part of this program a tailor-made program along with the leading figures in this field in Israel, and we are focusing on 6 core areas. Of course, international approach. This is something that every startup needs. Open platform that brings together the industry, government agencies, as well as investors. All the services are available at a one-stop shop IP, which is Lutzata, legal led by Fisher Bachar, etc., etc. And just as important, and we'll see it here, we are through the partnership with Migal and the Tel Chai Academic College. We make sure that a lot of lab equipment is available to the pilots and startups as part of this collaboration in the studio. Currently in the studio, we have approximately 31 companies. Over 35 million have been raised in the past year. We go through a very unique screening process. A lot of elements are involved. Everybody takes part. because we want to create an impact here in the Galilee. And I can tell you that if we look at our partners, of course, Migal, but along with Migal, Deloitte and Cisco and Luzzatto, whom you've just met, and others, and also ICA, the ICA Foundation, if you've heard about it, Poalim High Tech, all of these are accompanying these startups in the studio, and we bring them to a situation that within a year they can raise between $2 to $4 million. We've already experienced success, and we are looking forward to see which startup will win the competition that will take place on March 15th. I'll be brief now, and I'd like to invite Mr. Amir Hirschfeld. Is he here with us? He's a consultant to the Ministry of Energy. I think he's one of the figures with the largest amount of agrivoltaic knowledge in Israel. He comes from the startup world. He's an entrepreneur, and he's leading the authority, the innovation authority in this area, and he's going to give you some rules of thumbs. I think it's going to be fascinating. The floor is yours, Amir. I'm a bit nervous. It's been a while since I've stood in front of an audience. My name is Amir Hirschfeld. I'm an examiner in the Ministry of Innovation, and I started out sometime in the previous century as a mechanical engineer. I worked in the IAI, the Israel Aviation Industries, and then later on I stopped working in this field, and I started as development manager in CBV, CHP, and then I started another startup that existed for 8 years, and what you see in the back was the true connection to this world. We established a company that was called Company, the ID, company, yes, cannabis, to have controlled greenhouses. That's the center of the building, in which we are bringing to them from the morning, in which we cool the plant, make sure that it has additional CO2, more nutrition, and bringing much greater yield from a much smaller area. And our receptors in the morning, they bring, when they required, they bring light, and when they were not required to bring light, they were supposed to turn into APV, agrophotovoltaic. And now let's move on to this world. I'm going to use some examples from things I did in the past. But first of all, let's talk about the need. You know, it's clear to everyone that the world and the number of people in the world is growing at an immense pace, and we all know that this comes along with greater usage of energy, and this leads to environmental pollution and all the climate problems. We all know that there's less territory, less water, and yet a greater need for all of these resources. And still in the world, let's go back. Sorry. Okay, there. Is it responding? Slowly. So there is still hunger in the world. And where's my punchline? Where's the punchline? Okay, for some reason it's missing from this slide deck. I don't know why, but the punchline is that from this entire field or domain of energy and CO2 emissions, it's very important to understand that there's a direct link between this pollution. 25% of the pollution of these hothouse gases are directly related to that, and I can address this later. These are the major drivers of what we do. And the question remains, because when we look at such a field, I don't know, I swear to you, I can't tell you how much food can be grown here. I need to count panels and sizes and rows in order to give you an estimate of how much electricity can be generated. But what this market created when it just evolved was objection by the regulator and the world. First of all, food. We are growing food, and we're not going to share agricultural areas. And over the years, and this is why we're all here, this approach has changed at the beginning. It's changed into do no harm. Let's see how we can do it. And today, more and more, we're looking for synergy, that shared power of these industries together. It's true that I'm showing a plant here, but we're not talking only about plants, about cattle, about poultry, almost every crop that can generate or produce food. Ultimately, on the other hand, I have the privilege to sit here and talk about agro energy and not just agro photovoltaic. So the connection isn't merely photovoltaic, it's also connection to wind and water, just like Netafim, the person who spoke here before me, they demonstrated this beautifully. I couldn't give you a better business test case than that. And you know, all this leads to the next great thing. The next great thing, in order to reach these green fields, that's the question, where is the synergy and just how much this synergy exists, and whether a startup company can create a disruptive solution for two technologies which are major existing well-established technologies. Can this be done simultaneously? This synergy, this is what's going to lead the success of many of the startups, and we'll talk about how it will do that. I would like to leave one point for thought. The UN SDGs, you know, the Sustainable Development Goals. This is one of the indicators, one of the parameters that every startup needs to be familiar with and see where it excels at in this perspective. So what are the challenges that such a startup faces? Here, the winner from the competition of the Ministry of Agriculture from 2009, planning a new chicken coop. And I did raise poultry, I did work in chicken coops, and I have to say that unfortunately it was never executed. And if we only look at it graphics, we could see how much sense this makes. When we talk about startups, you know, we always talk about the stages of a startup. I'd like to crudely go over these stages and to look at some of these challenges. And you know, the first stage, when we talk about a startup that appeals to both markets together, the first major question is, how do we move from an ID to something that is proven, MVP, POC, whatever you want to call it? The major question is, how can we prove at a scale something which is true for both of these industries? A company which I showed you earlier, with that tracker, we tried really hard to see how we can create an MVP for this, and ultimately the need for a smaller PV and smaller trackers and minimalized solutions was more expensive than building something like this from existing things. For the same sum of money, I could have built what you saw, which was supposed to be over 1 dunam of cultivation, or something small which is barely 50 meters, but the proof proved otherwise, and that's merely one of the reasons why it was difficult to raise money back then. The next stage that such a startup needs to deal with is validation, you know, a proof of what you're doing. When you are appealing to one market, it's easier to validate. And when you are trying to approach two markets simultaneously, the question, how do you validate? What's the scope of the validation? Especially in plant-based markets, I think that you need to go through several seasons and a size. You are approaching a market of farmers, people who are at times, you know, more traditional, more stubborn, and who wish to see better proof if you want to touch their plants. And how do you get there? This proves that you have a customer base at the initial stage of the company. And just as important, how do you reach something which is what we call in the photovoltaic industry bankability? The growth stage is yet another challenging stage, and I've chosen a floating PV here. At the growth stage, we are talking about phasing out, going out from wherever it is that we're developing into the world and go through this Via Dolorosa to see whether the product is suitable for every market. What's the regulation? How can we resolve and overcome these things? And are we indeed capable of raising the sum of money needed for that startup at this stage? And because once again, we are approaching two large and very proven markets. So a bit about that as we approach, and this is a point that I'd like to describe now. the available cornfield. If we build it, maybe they will come. And you know, it's not that simple to reach your target audience. So product market fit, this is something that we discuss a lot, and in the literature, definitely, according to the literature, the question is, to whom are we selling? What are we selling? And of course, how do we solve the problem that differentiates the company? But I'd like to leave you with a certain thought and recommendation. The next triangle, and I'm not going to get into all the details, it's based on the capabilities of Jack Ben-Coxie from USVP, one of the smartest people in the area of startups. And he says to constantly make sure what's your penetration market, what's that penetration market you choose. For Israeli startups, this is a major question because Israel is not too big of a market. We are a very special market solar-wise, and therefore there's a major question here for everyone. What is your penetration market? So I suggest you looked at the product definitions, the sales method, and average sales price as something that defines what makes you your solution unique, and that will help you find your initial penetration market. I recommend that you find him, you look him up and find him and listen to his talks, because he's a very wise man. So we're talking about two very different markets. One speaks in a language that's almost completely economic. What are the returns? And we'll get into some other terms in their lingo later on. Well, there was a slide about agro there, and the agro speaks in a completely different language. So if we are indeed talking about this language, you know that agro speaks in the language of chemicals and seasons and harvests, etc. And the energy world talks about returns in kilowatt per hours. And every startup that will sit here will have to show to the third party, which is the party from which we want to raise the funds, and they are talking in a different language. They are talking about returns on investment, IP, disruptiveness, etc. And what I really want to recommend is that everyone is measuring the increase of startups according to KPIs, key performance indicators. And these indicators, and hopefully this is clear after my introduction, differ from one company to the next, especially in the world we're talking about today. And any startup that will come up here will have to choose and define what indeed are the KPIs that he is measured based on them. How will they measure themselves? According to which KPIs? And everybody can agree on profit. Almost everyone can agree on scale cycles. But in the agro world, we're talking also about yield and tons of things, you know, the plantation age and waste, and how much you lose from the field to the market. In the world of energy, we're talking in ROIs and MPVs and IRR, and soon I'll explain all these acronyms. And in the world of funding, we want to know what's our burn rate, what are the chances to reach 10x, what's the cost, etc. And this is when we don't even try to apply to this other metrics that come from the field of software and medical and other important things that a startup needs to know. So in order to have a successful startup, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But on the other hand, I'd like to say that what we see here in this conference and the opportunity, I think this is one of the biggest and most significant markets, because food and people are not going to disappear, hopefully, anytime soon. And we need to provide food to the whole world. And you know, this is a classic circular economy thing. The better we improve every side of this, we'll do better. So to do more, we need to grow more food from less territory. We need to grow better food, because already today we are the generation that eats best than any generation that okay, our children will be taller and stronger and will consume more food, so we need to do it better. On the other hand, just exactly like that guy from Netafim said, we need to do the same thing and to do it better, but with much less resources, to conserve water, to conserve energy, to produce these things, to create these things in the best possible way. And here, a startup that wants to raise money in this field needs to do several things to show synergy, to show it as best as possible. And on a personal note, my pet thing is that the solution that takes away CO2 from the environment, the solution that gets rid of CO2 better than plants hasn't been born yet. And I'm a big advocate of innovation, but still plants do it best. So the place where we can all grow and find solution is endless. And once again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. And I truly hope that I will be able to help the startups that will present here. Thank you very much. And if you want to take a picture of this last slide with all the explanation of all the acronyms I used, you're welcome. And if you want to ask questions, you're also welcome to do so. And now I'll leave the floor to the really important people here, the startups. Thank you, Amir. I do admit, well, I've heard this talk twice. It's the second time I'm hearing this, and it's still fascinating because, you know, it's kind of a new subcategory in high tech, this ability to take two worlds and to bring them together and to find technologies which empower each one of them separately. This is a new story because there's a lot of interest of new elements in this field. And when Migal decided to come up with this significant conference, we said, let's leave some room for startups. And it was a good opportunity to see how many startups there are in this field, how many startups are promoting innovation in this field. And we discovered several interesting things. So before I introduce them, over 22 startups registered, and they come from different areas. Some are about the infrastructure, others are about the service, others focus on the panels. We tried to provide a broad range that can show you just how broad this category can be, just like Amir said. And now I'd like to invite the first ones. We're going to invite our AgriLight, right? Ariel Rubin, please come up. I would like to say that this is being filmed and broadcast, and we have a lot of people watching us online. I'm trying to get the startups to be a bit nervous, but let's give them the floor. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Ariel Ruben. I'm one of the founders and CTO of AgriLight, and we only work with agrovoltaic. We were established 2 years ago. We don't do any other constellation of renewable energies unless it's above crops. Agricultural crops. Our offices are in Jerusalem, and we've been recognized for support from the Ministry of Energy with the funding from the Ministry of Agriculture to start the first startup that I'll soon elaborate on. So let me introduce some of the folks from our team that in the past 2 years have managed to bring us to where we're at today. It's been a privilege to start this company with my father, who comes along with 20 years of experience in high tech in Jerusalem. He founded 4 companies, 3 of them he sold to public companies in North America. And he's the active chair, Udi Wild, who's our CEO, who was the manager of Edeltech in the past 16 years. He comes along with a lot of know-how in the field of energy. He understands all the complexities of this field to bring innovation from this energetic world. We have Yossi Fischer, our our VP for technological development. He brought the entire field of floating PVs. He established the first system together with Mekorot here in Israel as well as in Singapore. So he brings our technological innovation. Aaron Goldman, CFO, he comes from the Public Corporations Authority. Zohar Lavi, one cannot move an inch, a millimeter without understanding the regulations. And after we received the funding and wanted to start with the pilot, we understood that we couldn't do anything because there's so much regulation involved, because we have the Israel Lands Authority and so many other government ministries involved. And he helped us navigate our way. Yuval, who comes from the world of sustainability, VP for business development. And why am I telling you so much about these people? Because at the end of the day, it's the people who make the companies. So let me show you a short video, a short simulation that we prepared that best illustrates what we developed over the past 2 years. So actually, you're going to soon see here one module of the system. And we're trying not to harm, of course, the agricultural crops. This is one model that we can replicate for the entire plot or plantation. We have sensors collecting a lot of data, and they transfer it to an algorithmic control system. That's the heart of our system that knows how to move the panels, and de facto, we know how to control the location of the shade. If we want to shade the crops or shade the spaces between the crops, if we're talking about plantations. So what are the advantages of our system? First of all, we know how to build the system over plantations or orchards that already exist. You don't need to plan a new one for our system. And we also reduce competition. Most of the solutions I know, it's either that radiation goes to electricity production or it moves on to the plant. None of the existing solutions uses both, but we at every given moment, we maximize electricity, energy production, and when we and also optimized photosynthesis and everything the plants needs. As far as the crop orientation, it doesn't matter if it's north, south, or east, west. We know how to build our system, and it can function in any type of orientation. And because of the sensors, because of the smart system, we have elements of precision agriculture, which can provide a lot of information for the farmer. So the sensors that we install on the land, they measure humidity in the land, the sun radiation, the weather, and then this entire thing, if we look at this abstract sketch of how the technology works, at the heart you have our system, which is cloud-based, and we are getting several inputs here. One is information about the crop itself, the ground itself, information, where it's located geographically, what's the spacing between the lines. All of these parameters are included. We have information coming from sensors and from the weather API. We have information of electricity generation, and the whole thing goes through real-time analysis in the cloud, and it issues two outputs. One is an order or command where to move the panels and where the shade should be located. Another thing, another output is a UI visualization for the farmer so he can see real-time agronomic data as well as data regarding the system's power generation. So where are we at today, 2 years after we've started? So we've managed to raise a seed funding. We've installed the initial version, the product's MVP here in the center of Israel. As we are speaking, it's moving the system. We've connected it to the engineering system and to our algorithm, and we've submitted a patent request made up of two parts. One is the unique structure that we've engineered, and another thing that's the algorithms. And from here, we pass on to the next stage to bring our system to the alpha version. Over the next few months, we're going to establish the first pilot funded by the Ministry of Energy. And the Ministry of Agriculture is going to be really close to here. It's going to be between 300 to 500 kilowatts, and it's going to be utilized over the next few months. And we finished another round of fundraising, and this will lead us to the product, which is the alpha product. And from there, we're going to move on to have 12 pilots here in Israel. I'll elaborate on that. We won 12 plots in the most recent tender, and 3 additional pilots in Europe. And there we will have a commercial system which we can start selling to the whole world. So where are our pilots going to be located? We have 12 pilots over 11 types of crops, and we have 12 research plans already registered from 4 different research institutes, the Shamir Institute, Volcani, R&D Arava, and the hosts of this conference, Migal. In addition, even though we weren't required to do so, we are going to conduct an ecological study funded by Noga company for managing the system, and along with the Ben Gurion University, we wish to examine the ecological influence of the system and how it impacts various insects and poultry. And we come here from the area of environmental protection, and that's our right to exist. The fact that it's beneficial both to agriculture and the environment. Our sandbox is here in Israel. As we've just heard, you need to see where you begin and how and or where to do you replicate your system. So we're here close to the farmers, close to the regulators, and physically close to the system. And then we're going to work in several markets in Europe. We already have some local strategic partners. We believe that's the best way to work with local partners, and we're working only in markets where we saw that the governments have placed agrovoltaics as a government goal, and actually they are providing grants and funds and tenders for that purpose. We're already working in 3 countries. The team just returned from one of them, and after we do that, we're going to expand this into the US as well. We're there, it's at a more younger stage of the market, but we believe it'll get there. We have a stand outside. You're welcome to come to us and ask questions, even though we're supposed to dismantle it in an hour, but we'll be very happy to answer any questions. I was Ariel Rubin. We are called AgriLight. Thank you so much for listening. And of course, if anybody wants to ask a question. The unique IP of the company is the algorithmic system. It's about how we take this, all this information, how we analyze it, and where is the shade, where do we move it to, and how does that impact the crops. Every crop, just like I showed in the national deployment, we're going to have over 11 types, and each of these needs a different system. I cannot shade the avocado as I do with the mango. So this is the unique IP that's being built with the agronomes and other people from data science and IT, and to bring all of this in real time. The second thing is the structure. Ultimately, it is also based on a patent. Thank you. I'd like to invite Bing Klima. Oded Shamir. Is Oded here? Yes, I know we're not objective, but it's a startup from right here from the Upper Galilee, from Kibbutz HaGoshrim, so he already has a good starting point. Thank you. Indeed. It's so wonderful to be here as everybody comes here close to our home, and we were in various international conferences with participants from Germany and France, and when it's close to home, it's interesting. So we took the agrivoltaic domain and we've brought it into the city. We are doing urban agrivoltaics, the first system in the world. It's a very strong patent for detached agrivoltaics. Our vision is enabling sustainable urban agriculture by combining solar power and hydroponic crops. Sustainable, it means that it's good for the environment and also financially, economically. So by this, we're connecting to a lot of global trends. The transition or moving into the city, we want to grow both the electricity and the agricultural crops inside the city where people consume them, not to need to transport all these things, not through the expensive grid or the transportation of the vegetables. You know, 70% of the price of lettuce is its transportation to make sure that there's minimal environment impact. And there are a lot of farmers here, and we all know that its impact on the environment isn't that good if we do it inside the city. It definitely has benefits, CO2 reduction, of course. We come from we really care about the environment, and we will show that, and the switch to renewable energies. Right now, there are all kind of solutions. So there's the field or the category of vertical farming. It consumes a lot of energy and can create a lot of or produce a lot of lettuce into the city, but there's a problem. There's also the green roofs. That's such an amazing category. If they turn all the rooftops in New York into green rooftops, the temperature will drop by 6 degrees every summer, but it's not cost efficient. This is why it provides benefits and incentives, the city of New York, to anybody who wants to do that. Not just New York, also Amsterdam and other countries. There are those who connect between non-yielding roofs with solar panels, and our innovation is the crop yielding roofs. So what's our solution? A combination, dual use, dual income, two sources of income that are simultaneous. We are reducing the urban heat, we're reducing CO2 emissions, and we're doing roof to table. Our crops go down from the rooftop downstairs to whomever needs them, whether it's a hotel, a restaurant, a supermarket. And by the way, this was on a rooftop at the center of Tel Aviv, at the Gimnasia Herzliya High School. This is an educational system. The kids study urban farming here. This is a commercial project. So what are we offering? Somebody mentioned patents. We have a very good patent. It's been approved. All of the hydroponics and solar, the water, all of them together, that's the patent. Once you turn it into a full system, that's it. That's the patent. We're doing solar energy, hydroponic growth, green roof, and water accumulation. We can add certain pipes to the system, and we are adding a blue roof. A blue roof prevents floods in the cities. If there is a buffer zone on the roof, it can prevent urban flooding when there's heavy rains. And we have a lot of flexibility. The first system that we've launched to the market is hydroponic. We can have a detached culture. We can even grow trees here. Several entrepreneurs have won with our system, have won the tender to grow trees. You simply lift this structure 3 meters. It's also a modular system. Our system, some of the entrepreneurs who see our system say, okay, if I want to build here in 5 years, I can install this now, and then I can move it in 5 years when I need to build here. That's a tremendous advantage of the system. If we're talking about the market, it's an $8 billion market in investment. You know, a lot of people ask us about the lettuce. Why are we talking so much about lettuce? $8 billion of retail in lettuce alone in the U.S. in 2019. All of the lettuce in the U.S. is grown either in California or Arizona. Just think about the trucks traveling all over the U.S. with the lettuce. If we're talking about 10 kilowatt, that's a standard rooftop. There are 500,000 rooftops like that. That's the size of the market in the U.S. And we're talking about $289 billion in urban farming. greenhouse gas emissions. This is how we got to this. How do you do sustainable agriculture? We have three elements that are reducing greenhouse gases. One is solar energy, the second one is plants, and number three, this is a unique system for passive cooling of the environment. We reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 7.5 tons of CO2 for a regular rooftop, 100-meter of an ordinary family that has 2 cars. This completely offsets the greenhouse gas emissions from these 2 cars. Our annual return, we have a double income, not just from solar energy, but also from the crops, the lettuce. The lettuce bring in just as much as the solar energy brings in. We have a pilot here at the Goshrim local restaurants. They buy everything we grow, and the price, the sums of money we get is just as much as we get for the energy. A bit about our team, Yuval Shamir and myself. We are the founders and entrepreneurs. He has rich experience. He was CTO of Lady and Amiat, filtering waters, the largest water filtering systems in the world. And he is the entrepreneur and the environmentalist. I come from the field of startups. I understood, Yuval told me that we can save the world in all kinds of different ways. We have a wonderful CEO. Her name is Miri Pellet. She comes from marketing. She was the CEO of a global marketing company. And Benny Guido, the man and the legend, he's our agronomist, our environmentalist that helps the farmers succeed. Our model is just like the Netafim model. Why did Netafim succeed in contrast to other companies that manufactured drip irrigation? They help their customers succeed. So that's been our model since the beginning. If we're talking about future developments, the user experience of an urban farmer, this is the future. It's going to be an automatic system monitored by an app. It's relatively very easy to do it when we're talking about hydroponics in comparison to detached culture. We have a system that we call it hexagons. It's visual. Some customers like hotels where you want to introduce the visual elements. So this is yet another system. And the future that we're talking about is for colder places. This is a sort of a greenhouse with a passive, internal passive heating system. And this system has been approved by the Innovation Authority. This is an arena that allows a non-diluting financing of up to 5 million shekels for 5 years every year. And through this assistance from the Innovation Authority, we're currently developing this system, which is our next generation. That's it. We're already doing this. We're already dealing with a climate crisis, and a regular commercial rooftop can become sustainable. Thank you. If anybody wants to ask something from the audience. Sorry, can't hear the questions. Well, we have 2 simultaneous business models. One is the sales, and once the system becomes autonomous. And the second model, which is just as interesting, is that of entrepreneurship. The large energy corporations in the stock exchange are the ones who hold the projects. We initiate projects. We reach a rooftop like this one. Oh, you can't see it anymore. We have these commercial rooftops. And we come to real estate owners and offer partnership. We only do the operations. We do take on us all the operations. We need to own the property for 25 years, and we all benefit from this, from the solar rooftop and from the crops. And it needs to be heavy enough so that the panel won't detach and fly off. And for the entire system, it should be light enough and not to collapse. The standard is 350 kilos per square kilometers, and that's what we aim at. We have the system on the rooftop of the Gymnasia Herzliya here at Goshrim. We have a pilot with all the future developments, and you're all invited to come and visit. That's it. Thank you. So we've just seen 2 startups talking about the actual thing, and now I'd like to delve into the actual panel. I'd like to invite Ilan and Shai. Ilan, who's the CEO of RSF. red solar flower. They've developed a unique technology that will complete part of the puzzle that you've seen so far. So Ilan, please. Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm delighted to see that even after such a rich lunch, still we have so many people who stayed and their eyes are even open. That's very encouraging. So first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of this amazing conference. It's such a tremendous opportunity to stand here and tell you about our initiative that's called Red Solar Flower. What is Red Solar Flower? It's an initiative which enables for the first time real synergy that makes it possible to have real synergy of a solar field and an agricultural field. This isn't working. Here it is. So now what's the need actually? We are responding to two needs that are probably pretty clear to the people sitting here. The first one is the need to increase the share of clean electricity, its proportion in our overall basket of energies. We generate solar electricity. And the second thing is the need to protect crops in the era of climate change from extreme weather phenomena, things that, we've all been experiencing. So anyhow, this dual use of the territory, you need to see exactly how it can be done in the best possible way. There's a scarcity of land, and we truly wish to create the maximum from this combination between solar panels and agriculture. And of course, the problem is an inherent one. Both solar panels and plants are both competing over the same resource, which is sunlight. And the question is, how do you do it right? So today, if we look at solar fields in agricultural territories, these are the images that you see. You can see the great spacing between the panels, and this is what makes it possible for the sun to come through, to penetrate through, and to provide the sunlight the plant needs for its photosynthesis in order to convert it to chemical energy. The question is, can more than this be done? So we are offering a different solution. We are developing a solar panel that passes on selectively. What does it pass on? The light that's required by the plant for photosynthesis. Which light is that? That's the red light. All the other wavelengths are, of course, converted into electricity. So in this way, when the plant receives everything it needs through the panel, I can cover 100% of the area with solar panels without interfering or harming the plant's habitat and conditions, perhaps to even improve that. Of course, if I'm covering an agricultural field 100% with panel coverage, that means I'm generating much more electricity per agricultural unit in comparison to the silicon-based one, because it needs much greater spacing in order to enable for the plants, the crops to grow and do photosynthesis. In addition, the fact that I have full coverage, it means that I'm actually protecting the crops that are beneath that coverage from extreme weather conditions, which of course are not rare at all today. For example, heavy rain or hail and sunburn. And in addition, at least in the lines, horizontal lines of our region, I reduce the heat stress over the plants, and this improves their well-being and their yield. And all of these things, of course, we're going to measure that through agricultural experiments. Let me just mention that we comply with 7 out of the 17 UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And let me tell you a bit about our technology, very, very briefly. Our technology is based on something that's called dropskite. It's made out of several molecules, a crystal made of several molecules available by nature. There's no silicon there, and the application is through these thin layers. It means that the total amount of material that is within an RSF panel, as we call it, is less than 5% of the amount of material that can be found in a silicon panel. The manufacturing process is also much simpler. It's actually quite similar to printing, because what you do is you print these thin layers. The width of them is between dozens to hundreds of nanometers. And another important point is that this material is highly tolerant to defects and infections, in contrast to silicon. I don't know if you know this, but in the manufacturing process of silicon, it goes through hell, so to speak. They, or literally, they raise the temperatures to hundreds of degrees in order to get rid of infections. To use hundreds of Celsius degrees, it means a lot of equipment and a lot of electricity bills, and it's a huge carbon footprint. For us, the only heating is for drying. It's something that's less than 100 degrees. So it's a tremendous advantage. What you can see on the right side is our proof of concept, and perhaps I hadn't mentioned this at the beginning, so now's a good time to mention that for the technology we received exclusivity from the Hebrew U in Jerusalem. And what you see here, the fact that it's a solar cell that already generates electricity and conveys the right wavelength. This was done by the head of the Perovsky lab at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. We'll talk about that later, but it works. Market. Well, the market is being pushed, that's quite obvious, by two main parameters. One is indeed the need to diminish the share of polluting energies or energies that come from polluting sources, and that means the production of clean electricity. And the second thing is the need to protect the crops from the weather. I don't know if you know this, but the FAO projects that by 2050, it's not that far off from today, we'll need to increase the food production capacity by 70%. And when you're not certain if at the end of the season you'll get the crops or not because of different climatic events, then you need to find a way to protect them. So this is what pushes the market ahead. And if we only look at the greenhouse market, this market is growing by 10% a year, CAGR. And if we once again zoom in and look only on greenhouses which grow vegetables, and that's a sub-segment, all in all, the area of such greenhouses was 5 million dunams in 2019. And it creates a market of $125 billion. And of course, the entire market is very huge, but that's not our problem. As far as the business model, the philosophy which we follow is a win-win philosophy. Everybody needs to feel good with this solution. So it starts with our customers. If I compare, let's say if a customer comes and I have my solution, and there's the solution I showed earlier, which is silicon-based panels, and if he wants to compare how much he's getting, etc. So we have this model of 1 hectare of one field and another field, and the MPV in our cash flow is 3 times greater than a field that has silicon-based panels. As for our investors who want to see a profit, well, because of everything I've mentioned earlier, the low cost of the materials and the much more expanded production process, we assess that the generation cost per watt is 60% that of a silicon-based panel, and it means in today's prices, which is $0.25 to watt peak, we are offering a net profit, which is 75% more than what a silicon panel can provide. Okay, I'm out of time. Let me fast forward this. What's important to know about our team? They all have a proven track record. We have Professor Chaim Rabinovich, Professor Emeritus from the Faculty of Agriculture in Rehovot. He is our consultant on crops, and he's also the co-founder. Professor Lioz Etgar, also a very well-known figure in the field of peroxide, and associate professor in the chemistry faculty of the Hebrew University, the head of the peroxide lab, and he has 8 patents registered under his name in this field. Dr. Shai Danziger, who's my partner, and along with him, we are doing this startup. He has a doctorate from the Hebrew University, and myself with a BSc in electrical engineering and computers, and an MBA from the Tel Aviv University. So what we have here is an opportunity of providing a response to the existential needs of humanity. It's not something fleeting that maybe in 2 years' time we can say, okay, this is no longer the trend, let's focus on something else. We are targeting a multi-billion of dollars market. We have the proof of concept. You've just seen it. Our patent has passed the provisional stage, and it is now being registered for PST, and I've just introduced the team. It's highly skilled, highly seasoned, and we are offering a solution in which 1 and 1 makes more than 2. Right now, we are seeking to raise $3 million to take us from the solar cell stage to the panel prototype stage. Thank you very much for listening. So that was merely a demonstration of agrovoltaics, really getting into the technology of the panel. This just comes to show you how much tremendous potential lies in this world. So thank you, Ilan and Shai. Now I'd like to invite Shmuel Yanai. Is he here with us? The founder, their solar drone, that's an example for a startup that gives services. It's very interesting, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. Hi, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. If some of you recognize me, it's because my older brother has this small connection to Nofar Energy. Solar Drone, this is a company that myself and a few partners established a year ago, and it's trying to solve the problem of cleaning the panels. It's a terrible problem for people living in the Galilee and also for those in the Negev, to anyone in the world. It's very difficult to clean these panels, and there's a decrease of 25 to 30% in the output if the panels aren't clean. Let's see this brief video. So that's our solution in brief, a drone that can wash very efficiently, very effectively. We want to be you know, the clean tech, maybe the largest cleaning company in the world for PVs, and maybe to provide many other services. Some of them you've just seen here, and others we'll see during the presentation. My wife, who's sitting here, said it's a tremendous irony that a person who never washed his own home and never cleaned his own panels at home is establishing a cleaning company, but we'll soon discuss this, but we're actually already in our V1, a prototype that's already doing a very good pilot in the Bilu region. We have reached a level of 1 glass per panel. It can carry up to 15 liters. By the end of the year, it can carry 30 liters in its operational commercial system, and that makes it possible to wash 500,000 panels. We're talking about a field of 50 mega that a drone with one capsule can provide all these services, washing, monitoring, securing. And the most important thing, to give a thermal service with AI to check if your panels, if there's a problem, what's the problem, etc. What you see, it's footage from today. This is our pilot from a major solar project of 7 megas in the south of Israel, in one of Israel's largest energy companies, not Nofar. So it's an amazing example of the efficiency. It's completely autonomous. There's no operator that's sitting behind the wheel operating. It has a polygon operating system. It's known in advance, and it goes on missions all day and all night. We can wash at night. That's a significant advantage. We don't depend on any weather conditions. We are based on an aerobotics platform. It's a publicly traded company. $128 million have been invested in this company to make sure that an autonomous drone is robust and durable to any environmental and weather conditions. And this changes the entire relay and the ability to produce a fully independent drone. It lands in a very special way with an electromagnetic couple. It's called a vinge, and not through image processing. And then there are zero problems. 100% it managed to land back safely, change its own battery, and refill itself with desalinated water. And it provides an A to Z solution to washing and cleaning. So a bit about the market. It's a huge market which is growing in the pace of the solar market that we're here in this conference. And it's already assessed in billions of dollars. 90% is done manually. And I think that, you know, companies traded here in the stock exchange, Copy, Bed Ranger, all of them do dry cleaning, robots. Another important sentence I heard from my wife, I asked her if we can just clean the home by just sweeping the floor with a broom for 30 days. And she said, no, you have to wash. So this dry cleaning, it's nice, but inapplicable. But in order to clean silicone and glass, we need to use water. A bit about our competitors in this world. In people that you've seen in different conditions, almost breaking the panels when they mount them to clean them, or being electrified or drowning in a floating reservoir. You need to take a lifeguard along with you when you want to clean such a floating surface. Or for cleaning, you can ask my older brother what a major headache it is for his company to clean a rooftop. It's special safeguards and special insurance. You can't do it at night. You have to do it between 5 a.m. That's when the insurance begins, and finish by 11 when they're so hot, the panels, because then you can't clean them with cold water because it'll create mini cracks. It's very, very difficult to do this by humans. So it's very important to enter this field and take out humans from the equation. So far we only have systems that waste a lot of water, like RFT, and this is good maybe in a world in which water is cheap. In Dubai, the solution of course is inapplicable. but other companies such as Copia and others, these are dry robots, especially in arid countries or in very specific topography. You need very long line of panels for this robot to be accessible and cost efficient. A table that summarizes our solutions in comparison to others. We tackle this issue of cleaning in a different way. We are the Air Force that bombs Gaza. We don't care about the topography. It's a mountain side, if it's a floating reservoir, if it's PV. This is the topic of the competition. Nobody asked here. Look at the logo over there of the conference. Nobody asked, how do you clean these kind of panels that are above fields? Who will make sure that, that the grass won't turn it into a hotspot because of the shading. With our kind of drone, we can do everything. We can irrigate the agricultural field. We can do pest control. We can do ecological, surgical pest control around the panel to make sure that no stray vegetation grows there. And mainly, I can provide true cleaning of panels for these huge panels. Think about the panels you've seen here in the previous company. It's a very high structure, a lot of meters high, and no robot can actually work there because the panels move and no human can reach there. And because this is cleaning in a high altitude, it's very difficult to clean it, not with a drone. And this table summarizes our advantages. Maybe it's very difficult to read the small font. My older brother, when we would meet on Fridays, he was an amazing designing partner. He told me what not to develop a year or 2 years ago. For example, a drone with a hose. It seems like a much more logical and cost efficient, but the hose will actually touch the panels. And when it touches the panels, it can break or damage the panels. A drone that lands on the panel, just like Blade Ranger wanted to develop 6 months ago, and recently they've announced that they stopped that development. A public company that burned millions of dollars on that development. Why? Because no one who's an owner of a solar field won't bring in a drone that promises soft landing on the panel. The third or fifth or 100th landing, this drone won't land softly on the panel. It'll break the panel, and then there's a serious maintenance issue. And these are all the options of the things we can clean. That's a very small, variety, just things we got off the internet. And that's our greatest advantage in comparison to our competitors. We can clean anything at any given time, at any kind of weather. The other services of aerobotics that are already operational, it safeguards the expo in Dubai. It's active in Singapore, in the US, and many other countries. These are services that are adapted to the solar industry. Just imagine in a field of 100 mega, if I can do monitoring, safeguarding, thermal daily imaging to collect data on the field, on the maybe broken or damaged panels. I can provide so many services, and my entry card into the business is the drone that washes somebody that they're already paying for. They're paying quite a lot for it, and still they're not pleased with the results they get from manual washing today. Let me tell you a bit about the company and our evolution. I founded it over a year ago. And I think that the significant breakthrough was in our deal with aerobotics a few years ago, just before it went public, and the company received a joint IP from aerobotics. Everything we develop for renewable energy belongs to us along with aerobotics, and we've made a lot of developments with a unique IP because we knew that people would ask at the beginning or at the end, what's the special IP? We're developing a foam so that we won't need water. It's a foam that the drone will spray on the panel. It will gather all the dust, and the rotors will get it to fly off the foam to fly off the panel with all the dirt, and this will completely change the size of the field on which we can work with one individual drone. And there are some very interesting AI developments. Nati Yanai, who's the head of AI in ELTA, works with us, and he's received special permission to work with us on the weekends. He's one of the most impressive people in this field in Israel. So I think that there are a lot of things that we can add on top of this Swiss knife or iPhone that can be used for solar energy. We are now trying to raise $5 million to accelerate processes. We have a memorandum of understanding in a company of Vietnam, one of the largest companies in the world in the solar field, for services of 7 gigas over the next few years that will guarantee $15 million of revenues to the company. I'd like to mention in this context that wherever we go, I was in an exhibition in the expo in Dubai with my iPhone. I showed Sheikhim the solution, you know, for that video you saw at the beginning. I felt like Mecca, these sheiks coming all to see me and my little iPhone, and then ultimately I ran out of battery. And ultimately, you know, this solution is an amazing thing for entrepreneurs. This issue of improving output, increasing output, it's the very core of every solar company and every entrepreneur. Let me tell you a bit about our team. I've already mentioned Nati. You've already gotten to know me. Liki, who's the CFO, highly seasoned in finances. Shai Ziv, a young man from General Electric. I think one of the most important driving forces in our company, Merav Itzhaki, who's a VP of Business Development. She came from Kalkalist. She was a VP of Business Development of Kalkalist, a newspaper. Elad Safri, maybe some of you know him. He's from the Electricity Corporation. He's a consultant to all the major companies, DF, Electric, you know, all the largest companies use him as a consultant, and he's a very good consultant. It's very important for the company to better characterize the system. Gadi Aleli was operations manager of Ashalim Megalim. That's the famous thermosolar of Karen of the Noy Foundation. He's a number. He brings profound knowledge about what the O&M, the operating company, needs, and we use him well. And Alon, who's actually an engineer, and he's developing the V2 capabilities. Thank you very much, everyone. We have one question here from the audience. Well, I didn't get all the people sitting here to sign an NDA, but I did tell you that we're working on this foam that can clean everything, you know, pigeon poop, and it's really etched into the panel, and any other kind of dirt. I can tell you that surprisingly enough, it even surprised me, since I don't have any operational knowledge of cleaning, but using this that swirls the water, the desalinated water, it leads to amazing cleanliness. I was at Greenbrush, I used their broom, and I saw how the panels look after desalinated water, and the broom, the panel after we place all types of dust and dirt on it. Still, the cleaning process by our drone, the outcome, the result is amazing. Thank you. One last company, I'd like to invite Bar Weiss from Sun Agri. We've seen a bit about service, a bit about the panel, a bit about the facility, but this company looks at agrivoltaic from a 360 degrees angle. Can everybody hear me? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, Migal, Arik, Ori. You know, I've been in this field for 2.5 years. For me, it's a celebration. I feel like it's, like a birthday, like everybody came to see agrivoltaics. I've been in the field of solar energy for several years. I've been involved in agrivoltaics in activism through the Angel Project of the Eshel Center, and also an agrivoltaic researcher in the Tel Aviv University in economic research. And currently I'm a Sun Agri's country manager, and I'll soon tell you about them. And about 2 months ago, I started working for Sun Agri. Before that, I was at Shikun and Binui Energy. We went to the pilots and we went through this whole process, and we won 37 pilots. And there are 160 pilots in pilot projects in Israel. If it's not clear yet, in a matter of 3 or 4 years, we're going to be the country that people look at when they talk about agrivoltaics. We'll have the greatest amount of know-how and professionalism. This is why Sun Agri, and today, even before I worked in it, was a leading company in this field, and it decided to open its first chapter outside of France, right here in Israel. So let me tell you a bit about the SunR Group. SunR has several subsidiaries. The one that interests us is our interesting company is Sun Agri, that only deals with agrivoltaic. This company has 3 connected real projects. 3 of them are commercial scale, that's 30 to 40 dunams. There are a lot of patents. And if we have the innovation tender in Israel of 140 megawatts, that's approximately what they had in France over the past 3 years. And 70% of the innovation tender belongs to Sun Agri. That's over 180 ergowatt peak, and it's all going to happen over the next 2 or 3 years. There are 30 in Sun Agri who developed the technology. The DNA is very research-based in agriculture. A lot of researchers, agronomists, a lot of people from the field of mechanical science and computer science. When I was in Shikun and Binui, I tried to understand, is this a young company? It's been active for 14 years. I tried to figure out who this company is, and this is an important slide. Over the past 12 years, it has been developing agrivoltaic research. The first paper published in the world is by Christian Duprat. He spoke here this morning, and that was following collaboration with Sun Agri. And over the past 12 years, they've been funded by the French government in 3 programs, Sun Agri 1, 2, and 3. Each one took the technology one step ahead, beginning from the proof of concept to, and then AV Studio. It's like a TV6-1. It doesn't just tell me what's on top, but also what's on bottom, how much light comes in, where exactly is that light in line with the movement of the panel, and also crop modeling. This is something that's very hard to learn in Israel, and just imagine a canopy that they're beginning to model it, height, width, sides, how it grows over the years. And when I combine the dynamics of the light that moves, we can say today, now 20% of the canopy is in the sun, now 30%, now 40%. And this happens real time, all the time, as the plant grows and the panels move. And the crop modeling was not just to say what this crop looks like, but it actually describes the phonologies and connects them at what point in the day, within the year, specifically for this microclimate. How much light do I need? How much heat do I need? And how do I change this microclimate exactly in line of what this plant needs real time? There's a lot of research that's being done here. I've already said that. 2 very well-known prizes, the Sival and the Cité, and something that for me as an energy entrepreneur really surprised me until several years ago is to what extent it's an agriculturally oriented company. So it's not, there are now some vacant dunams, there's a new area that we can use PV on, but it's on top of agriculture, so let's do something about it. This company speaks, looks, and breathes agriculture. You can see the yields impact on the left. This is projection for 2050. The green colors That's the reduction in agricultural yield as a result of climate heating. And we understand that the world, not only is it suffering today, the projection for the future are very severe and bleak. You can see just a few examples here, and we need to ask the Migal researchers and farmers how many burnt leaves and dried up grapes they see. And it's interesting to say that in France, they started with wine. Why wine? First of all, of course, the French love to drink wine, and this is something I realized when I was there, even though I knew that in advance. But the wine cannot be sold if there's over 15% alcohol. In Israel, we probably would say, oh, you could get cheaper wine with a greater percentage of alcohol. Well, that's efficiency, but the quality of French wine, once it goes beyond 15% alcohol, it cannot be sold. And then it's a problem for the farmer who simply cannot sell his yield during that year. And this is what has happened in recent years because of the heating. There is more alcohol, more photosynthesis, more sugar. They can't control the level of alcohol, and the yield of an entire year needs to be thrown to the garbage. And this helps them get exactly the product they want. And of course, with wine, it reaches the edge of optimization, but with other crops, it's also very important. This is the agrivoltaic basic concept. You'll see different types of facilities, and I've known all the companies in the world that are engaged in this, and it remains with the same concepts. And if you understand this slide, you understand the entire story. And we've seen RSF before, the issue of spectral split, how I can use only certain parts of the light. This is something very interesting for the future. Everything I've seen so far, startups, universities, etc., usually one comes at the expense of another. Either the plant lives well, but it generates a little energy, or it generates a lot of energy, but it's not that good for the plant. It's a physical problem. When we take a spectrum of between 700 to 1,000 and try to do our PV there, we have less energy per photon. Until they resolve the physics, then we're facing a certain restriction. In Sun Agri, we're dealing with the right-hand side of the screen. You'll see all types of facilities. We wish to work on all of them. We don't have only one type of installation. The upper arrow leads to prevention of ongoing shading. We wish to create greater distribution of light, 10 centimeters, solar 10 centimeters glass, in order to break this sequence of shading. Another issue is a GCR, ground cover ratio. We're trying to occupy less territory with our panels in order to enable more light to come in. That's the most basic thing. What I've been fighting against, at least in the past 2 years, is to educate the market on dynamics. If there won't be trackers, and there could be all kinds of trackers, one axis, dual axis, all kinds of things that people are creating, but we need dynamism. Without it, agrivoltaic, the chances for it to succeed are much, much smaller. The same crop needs a different light in different times. The same crop over years needs different lights in different times, and the crop changes because when the prices of avocados drop, everybody will uproot the avocado trees and something else will grow. We cannot change the fixed tilt mix, but we can change the algorithm, and an algorithm is very easy to change. You need to understand the story, how much light the plant needs, and in accordance to create a new algorithm. And this is how I'm trying to educate the market, not to save on CapEx and to install trackers. That's very, very important. And it's highly adaptable. It's a kind of Lego, the structure in line with the lines of the plants and the spaces between them. It could be either east-west or north-south. The canopy lines, panels are always, north-south. The GCR changes in accordance. Everything happens on top of these. On top of the structure, you can add additional agricultural applications. And today we're dealing with the initial issues of panels, but there are so many things that are currently being developed, and the purpose is to bring the most holistic solution possible in order to see the plant. And we don't use concrete at all. It's all through pillars in order to maintain the health of the land. GCR that's based on spacing and density, special tracking functionality. First of all, you need special trackers. What are special trackers? You can, well, most of the PV world, the trackers are up to 75 degrees, and we want maximal flexibility. That means 90 degrees, a panel that can do this from one end to another. So why do we want that? In order to have steering policies. I wish to move the panels not in line with the sun. If the sun goes like this, this will no longer be the situation. Some of the time it'll go like this, but at other times it actually goes parallel or semi-parallel or in line with whatever the algorithm decides. And it's in order to do two things. First of all, to optimize the photosynthesis. Anybody that works in agriculture, you're well familiar with the lines, and there's an excessive light, and you know, the plant needs just so much light, and there's the protection from climate hazards. Israel, especially with excessive light, excessive heat, these are things that farmers can lose a crop for an entire season. This is one field, and you have here mesh or nets to protect from hail, but you can also, it's not for shading, but you can add shading, and we put sensors on the ground and close to the plant, on the branches, on the leaves themselves. All the information from the sensors goes into a SunAgri black box, and this speaks to the panels, and the movement of the panels is in accordance with what the plant needs in real time. So this is most of the hazards we usually see on top of excessive heat or cold. There's hail, there's frost. But of course, heat in Israel, that's the main issue. And this entire system is autonomous. After you do the initial launch, and the SunAgri scholars say this is how the system needs to behave, this is what it should like, then the movement will change in accordance. If it's a cloudy day, we'll provide more light to the plants. So these are some of the figures we know how to present. You see -5 degrees and heat waves, it'll be much more dramatic, including water consumption that is going to be much more serious here in Israel. These are examples for this, times in which you can calculate through the prevention of a heat overload. How many frost appearances did I prevent here? 5 out of 7 we managed to prevent in one of the projects, including the water efficiency. I'm trying to finish up quickly. We don't have much time left. And bottom line, there is a lot of presentation, a lot of companies with a lot of videos, a lot of presentations. We're a bit like Nike, agrivoltaics. We do it, you know, just like Nike's just do it. We do it best in the world today. And I can say this from even before I was wearing this hat, when I was in the hat of selecting a technology. This is the technology I selected. That's it. Thank you very much. So this was just a demonstration of several prominent companies from all the companies in the competition. Let me say a few words. We have a panel of judges with the Migal Research Center, the Luzzatto Group, JVP, Trendline, that it's the Innovation Authority in Bar. I don't know if she's here. And each of these, whom I've just listed, they are taking an active part in this. It's open up to the 15th of this month. We'll choose one of the companies that will have the accompaniment of all of these in order to help them raise between $2 to $4 million over the next 6 months. So thank you for the privilege to introduce some of these companies. Now I'd like to invite all of you to the Chief Scientist panel that's next door. And of course, if you want to ask or discuss things, we're still here. Thank you very much.